Hey, this is Robbie Baseball from the Dingers Fantasy Baseball Podcast, and you are listening to Pop Goes Your World.
I'm Chris McBrien, and the pop culture from Generation X is everything to me.
And I'm Derek Myers, and I'm here to educate Chris on the great pop culture of today's generation.
Episode 163, Raging Bull Movie Review. Chris McBrien, that's Derek Myers, and this is Pop Goes Your World, the pop culture podcast for the generations. Derek, we usually open the show, by sharing anything new that we've experienced in pop culture. So let's get started. First of all, how are you? And then what's new in pop culture in your world?
Hey, Chris. I am well, as usual. Thanks for asking. New in my world? Well, wouldn't be a week on Pop Goes Your World if Derek didn't have a documentary review to share with the listeners.
Nice.
So the documentary that I had a chance to watch this week is called President in Waiting. It's about the vice presidents in the United States, and it's a CNN film, so it was on CNN, and I'm sure they'll run it again. And it was fabulous. Whether you are into politics or not, whether you are a Democrat, a Republican, or an independent, it doesn't matter. This isn't so much about politics as much as it's about the office of the vice president and how Walter Mondale was the first vice president to essentially make that job a job that someone would want to do. Prior to Carter becoming president, all the previous presidents before that had picked vice presidents that would help them win an election and then not given the vice president anything to do. And all the interviews with vice presidents after the fact, they all said they hated the job. They wouldn't wish it on their worst enemy. They would never take it again. But when President Carter came in, he lacked a certain amount of experience, and so he needed a vice president who had a tremendous amount of political experience. And when Mondale came in, he basically wrote out a document and said, Mr. President, these are the things I think as the vice president I need to be able to do. And President Carter was smart enough to realize that this is a good idea. Why have one person carry all that pressure and stress and burden when you've got a perfectly capable number two there who's willing and able to help? And every vice president since then has referred to this vice presidential document that Mondale created, and that has essentially become the job description of every vice president that's served since then. And this documentary has interviews with every living president and vice president, with the exception of President Trump, because obviously they filmed it in the last year or two, and he's the man on top. He's busy. He can't be doing documentaries. But they do interview Vice President Pence, so it obviously is fairly recent. And it's a fantastic look at this interesting component of American government that I think a lot of people don't really have a clear understanding of. And even as a non-American, as someone looking in from the outside, it was fascinating. So Chris, I think you would really enjoy it, and I think that anyone who is even moderately interested in how the highest office in America works, it's absolutely worth your 90 minutes or so.
Very good. I'm really glad that you mentioned a documentary again this week, and we're going to come back to that in just 1 second. But before we do, I do want to give a little bit of a shout out. We have a big celebration around Pop Goes Your World this week, and even though he's not with us, we did want to give a big shout out and say happy birthday to the one and only Yancey Eaton. Happy birthday, Yancey! He's still, a year older, but he's still, this young millennial.
Yeah, I was just going to say, he said he's no longer with us. I want to make it clear. He didn't die. He's just not a part of the show on a regular basis anymore.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Yancey, happy birthday, bud.
Yes, Yancey, happy birthday. You're still alive, and we're so glad for that, my friend. So I'm glad you mentioned the documentary, because almost every week here at the top of the show, you mention a new documentary that you've watched. You tell us a little bit about it. And then last week, no documentary. And our good buddy Luke Martin mentioned to me on Twitter that it felt a little empty at the top of the show with no new Derek documentary. So, sort of in the spirit of cooperation, I watched a documentary this past week, and I thought I'd share it. I'd share it. It was on Netflix, and it's called The Social Dilemma. Have you seen it, or have you mentioned it here on the show?
It's on my watch list. I have not watched it yet, but I know about it, and it is on my watch list. I will definitely be watching it at some point in the not too distant future. So how was it? Tell me about it.
It was good. I'll try not to give away too much, but it's essentially...
Try not to spoil it too much, but I do have a sense of what it's about.
Yeah, so it's essentially about how your social media feed influences your opinions. Especially in regard to how the social media algorithms are designed to basically just keep feeding you content, that's most likely to get some kind of engagement from you. Like they determine it by, what you click on or what you like or what you comment on. And the problem becomes that you just keep getting inundated with similar material. And it becomes a problem because it creates these bubbles where people only get information and content that they agree with. And they basically get no exposure to anything that they disagree with. And the ensuing result from that is this increasingly polarized society. And it becomes magnified when you're dealing with people that believe, the world is flat, or research is, watching 2 YouTube videos from some guy in his parents' basement or something. And it basically creates this sort of ongoing spiral of misinformation. It's very fascinating. And to be honest, it was a little bit scary too. Some of the insiders that are interviewed for the documentary, they believe this could even lead to civil war in the United States because, you're going to say, yeah.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, you were going to talk about a civil war, which is obviously a little more important than what I was going to jump in with. But to your point, I have noticed this over, I'm a big user of Facebook, and I've noticed over the last few years exactly what you're saying. I tend to see the same kinds of articles, the same kind of posts from the same kind of people. I get the same kind of advertisements. And it occurred to me that I might have... I'm going to pick a number. Let's say it was 500 friends on Facebook, but I was only seeing posts from maybe 10 or 20 of them on any sort of a regular basis. And so I actually have made a point every few months I go through Facebook and I pick 10 or 20 random people that I don't think I've heard from recently, and I look at their feed. And if I don't think that it's anything I really care about, or if it's a person I don't really socialize with anymore, I'll remove them from my list. And I find that is almost like rebooting the algorithm, where they realize, oh, you're not friends with these 10 or 12 people anymore. We have to do a small tweak to your algorithm. And suddenly I've started to see different posts from people who I'm already friends with but was not seeing before, and I'm starting to see some slightly different advertisements and other suggestions. So I found that has been a very healthy exercise for me to just go through on a fairly regular basis, maybe every 2 or 3 months, find 10 or 15 people, if again, assuming you have a massive list of friends that you've accumulated over the years, and go, oh, here's someone from my old job, haven't talked to them since I left the job, delete. And I found around this time last year, when the U.S. election was starting to really ramp up, that's when it made the most difference. Is I was able to go through, and it really helped me get opinions from different people who had different points of view from different places across the U.S. So, in any case, back to you and your Civil War.
No, well, I found it just fascinating because really, the one thing that sort of held society together, in the past, was at least there was a sense of a common or shared reality. At least people could relate to a common set of truths. But truth has basically now been manipulated, and it's being replaced by these conspiracy theories, and social media is basically propagating it, and it just keeps getting worse and worse. And Derek, if you think about it, it's kind of like a metaphor for what we do around here. I'm stuck in my bubble watching only stuff like, Happy Days and WKRP and Meatballs over and over. And you're always trying to get me to break out of my bubble and watch newer stuff. Obviously, the big difference between watching Meatballs for the 50th time and, thinking Bill Gates is trying to inject me with a micro-tracking chip or, something like that. But anyway, I guess the whole point is that I'm stuck in my bubble, I'm old, and I'm lame. So
here's your dad joke of the week.
Derek, I thought I would do something a little bit different this week for my dad joke. Are you okay with that?
Yeah, let me guess. Is it going to be funny this week? Because that'd be different.
Because it's always so lame, right? And it's not funny. I decided I would do something a little different. I thought it would be really cool if I involved my 7-year-old son.
Okay.
All right. So what I did was I actually recorded this earlier, but here it is. All right, Sean, I have a question for you.
What?
Who tells the best jokes of all time?
Chris McBrien.
You don't sound very convincing. Are Daddy's jokes funny or are they lame?
Lame.
What makes my jokes lame? I don't get it.
Because they make no sense. Here, tell one of your dad jokes.
All right, let me think of a dad joke. What does a mermaid use to wash her tail?
Soap.
No, Tide.
See, I told you, they're cringy.
Oh, jeez. We've been nominated for a podcast award here every year since we started doing the show. So I think the format's working okay for us.
Forget it. We're making changes.
You can't keep forcing me to watch these bad movies.
If you don't like it, too bad.
This movie was so bad.
It's not Back to the Future.
There's probably not a person on the planet who likes 1986 more than me.
It had a great soundtrack.
John Cusack was so hungover.
You know, the dick and fart jokes.
They should have called it the Hot Mess Time Machine.
Come on, wah.
All right, Derek, it was over to me this week to pick a movie because the last film that you did was The People versus Larry Flint. And so to keep in the spirit of that movie being a biopic about a, person of questionable moral, composition, I decided to kind of go with the same kind of theme. And I went with 1980's Raging Bull. And that's obviously Martin Scorsese's film. He directed it. The screenplay was by Paul Schrader. It's starring Robert De Niro, Joe Pesci, Kathy Moriarty, and Nick Colasanto. I would say if you're a film buff, whether or not you like this film, you have to at least appreciate it as a piece of art, because as far as I'm concerned, that's exactly what it is. It's kind of a throwback to early Hollywood and even foreign films that use the medium of film in really creative ways to tell a story, and they use imagery, and the film is like a canvas, to paint a picture. So that being said, where does Raging Bull stack up for you? I don't think you'd ever seen it, or maybe you had seen it once and you weren't really sure, but you went back and watched it this week. So where does it stack up for you? Not just among Scorsese's films, but maybe just in general as a film.
Okay, so I had seen this once before.
That's what I
thought.
Yeah.
In the mid to late 90s when I was working at Blockbuster Video. I think I mentioned this at the end of the last show. We used to get 10 free movie rentals a week at the video store. So
nice.
You were always looking for some motivation. What should I rent next, and why would I rent it? And so you would often go on a run. Hey, I'm going to rent everything Tom Hanks has ever been in. I'm going to rent everything that Julia Roberts has been in. I'm going to rent every movie directed by Milos Forman. And so one time we said we're going to rent every movie directed by Martin Scorsese. And that was when I saw Raging Bull for the first time. We were doing a Scorsese film fest, which I thought was a good way to do it, because then I got to compare it. Like, I like Scorsese's work a lot. I don't like everything he does, but for the most part, I do enjoy his work. And so it was a good way to really measure one movie of his against another. And at the time, I remember thinking, it was just okay. Keeping in mind, I would have probably seen Goodfellas and Casino within a day or two of this, and those are two movies I really, really like. Mm-hmm. Now, in the late 90s, the AFI, the American Film Institute, started putting out their famous AFI Top 100 lists.
Oh, right.
And so in the middle, I think it was the late 90s, they put out their very first one where it was, 100 years, 100 films, and these were the best 100 films, American films, ever made.
Oh, interesting.
And
that would be good.
Raging Bull was number 4.
Yep. Okay.
All time American movie, top of the list. Only 3 movies beat it. Mm-hmm. But Raging Bull is number 4. And then in the years since then, they've updated the list as newer films have come out, and as maybe older movies have gained a little bit more appreciation. And then they've subdivided the categories as well. They've done like action movies and romantic movies, and sports movies was one of the categories they've also done. And Raging Bull was been the number 1 sports movie on the AFI's list of the best American sports films ever made.
Interesting.
So, it ranks number 4 on their all-time list of any movie, and it ranks number 1 on their list of sports movies.
Okay.
I hated it.
Jeez.
This movie was terrible. It was. I didn't like it at all. I felt that I wasted. First of all, it's 2 hours and 9 minutes.
Yes.
I felt like I wasted 2 hours and 9 minutes of my life. I couldn't wait for this movie to end. It was so bad. Now, in all fairness, the direction and the way the movie is shot, great. I can totally understand and appreciate that from an artistic point of view, from a film lover, someone who has studied film, someone who has studied communications, who's worked in communications, as a pop culture guy, as a film aficionado. I can appreciate that. And from that point of view, I think Scorsese's direction, outstanding. And I'm sure we're going to talk a little bit more about that as we go. The idea to do it in black and white, the way the cameras were, the way the movie is shot. Awesome. A lot of very good and, at the time, I'm sure, risky choices made by Scorsese that paid off. So from that point of view, top marks. But as a whole, terrible. I didn't find the subject matter interesting. I didn't find any of the characters interesting. In fact, most of the characters, and especially the character played by De Niro, the boxer LaMotta, had no redeeming qualities. I had no desire to see this person succeed whatsoever.
That's the point.
And none of the supporting characters had any redeeming qualities either. They were all terrible, and they were terrible to each other. And it was just, no, I couldn't wait for this movie to be over. And I don't think I ever want to have to watch this again, given that there are so many other movies that have come out that I have never seen before. I would rather try something else once than go back to this and have to sit through it, which would now be a third time. So that's my initial take.
No problem at all. I mean, lots of times you nominate films and I don't like them. You know what I mean? So that's what it's part of the whole thing. That's what I think is going to make the next hour of this podcast so much fun, is talking about this. I would like to point out one thing, though. The drop that we just did with the sort of the compilation that we do at the beginning of every show was Hot Tub Time Machine.
I was going to say, I think that was from Hot Tub Time Machine.
Yeah.
And I was giggling here. I thought that was great.
So this is coming from a person, Derek Myers, Caveman, who has nominated Hot Tub Time Machine for this podcast. You have the audacity to say Raging Bull is crappy. So let's just put it in, that context. Okay, so that being said, I think this is going to be interesting. Normally, every week when we review one of our movies, we kind of break the movie down scene by scene, and we kind of walk through the whole movie and kind of relive it all.
I don't think we need to do that this
week.
Because
you hated
so long,
it so
we'd
much.
be here all night.
Yeah, because you hated it so much. Let's just talk about the film in general, and let's just pick it apart in regard to several themes and several topics, because what I think I'd like to do is, at least if we do that, by the end of this podcast, hopefully I'll be able to convince you of enough, merits of the film for you to kind of reconsider your stance. So that's what I'm going to try and do. All right? Now, let's talk about Scorsese a little bit. He went to film school in New York. He went to NYU. So he was sort of separate from that California film school generation. Guys like Lucas and De Palma and Francis Ford Coppola and Spielberg. And because he was separate from those guys, his films always looked different. They had that New York feel to them. And the themes that he explored in his films were inherently different from those other directors. Personally, and I mentioned this before, I still think his best film is Taxi Driver from '76. Now, Yancey and I reviewed that all the way back on episode 58 of this podcast, which, by the way, I just want to say, I think that might have been one of my all-time favorite episodes of doing this podcast. No offense, Derek. I remember that episode. It's one of my favorite movies. And also, if I remember correctly, I used a bunch of millennial terms on Yancey, and he was just cringing the whole time. Maybe a bit of a precursor to the whole dad joke thing. But anyway, So just a little bit of production notes on the film before we get into it. So Martin Scorsese, you mentioned you got a chance to watch his body of work. He started out with Who's That Knocking at My Door, which I think he originally shot as a student film. It was released in '67. And then he went on to do Boxcar Bertha, Mean Streets, Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore, and Taxi Driver. If you think about it, that is an absolutely astounding run for a young director. And then came his ambitious musical, New York, New York, which just bombed. And it sent Scorsese into a depression. And he really got into drugs and got addicted to cocaine. And then one day, De Niro went to see him in the hospital. And De Niro gave him Jake LaMotta's autobiography. and he told Scorsese he wanted to make it into a movie. And Scorsese went back to his roots, sort of as an independent filmmaker, because New York, New York was more of a traditional studio movie, you know? And for me, the result of him going back to his roots was his most stylistic and classic art film of his entire career with Raging Bull. And you completely disagree, right?
Yeah. Well, again, I can appreciate the movie from an artistic point of view. I didn't find it entertaining. And for me, when I watch a movie, unless I'm being graded by a professor on my analysis of it, I want to feel like I've been entertained. And hey, I can watch depressing movies and still feel that I've been entertained. You can watch, like I watch tons of documentaries, and lots of those are horrific. Like bad things happen to people.
Or something like The Killing Fields, which we've talked about before.
Yeah, but exactly. Great example. Again, it's a movie about atrocities that really happen, and it's very emotional, and there's a lot, you're crying at the end of it. But it's like, I still feel like I've been entertained, and I think entertainment doesn't always have to equate to a smile, but I want to feel like I got the time I've spent with this piece of art, I've gained something out of it. And I just feel that with this movie, unless I'm breaking it down as a directorial study, none of those other things applied. I didn't enjoy it. I didn't feel entertained. I didn't. There's a lot of stuff that I didn't care for. And I think some of that has come from time, in that the movie is now, it's 40 years old, and so many things have come since then, and the medium has changed so much in 40 years that sort of my expectations change. Like I'm sure we'll talk about De Niro and his body transformation in this film, and how revolutionary this was, that this hadn't been done before. But to look at it now with today's lens and sort of just look back, you're like, well, hey, that's great. Good for him. Look how great shape he was in as the boxer, and look at how crappy shape he was as the retired boxer. And hey, he deserved an Oscar. His performance was good. I just didn't feel the source material was worth my time. I didn't care for it at all.
Interestingly enough, audiences at the time agreed with you, because although when it was first released, Raging Bull was hailed, by critics as a masterpiece right away. Rightly so, I would argue. You wouldn't. But audiences believed the way you did, Derek. They didn't care for it. And like New York, New York, Scorsese had another box office dud on his hands. It cost $18 million to make this film, and it made $23 million at the U.S. box office. And, you think, oh, well, then, it made a little bit of money. But by comparison, The Empire Strikes Back made 10 times that much that year. The Raging Bull finished 20th overall at the box office, just ahead of Xanadu, by the way. Another favorite. And if you think about even the top ones that year, like I say, Empire Strikes Back, there was 9 to 5, Stir Crazy, Kramer versus Kramer, Any Which Way You Can, like Private Benjamin, Coal Miner's Daughter. There were some good movies in 1980. But that being said, there were some really bad movies in 1982. I was looking at the list. Where the Buffalo Roam, In God We Trust, Guild Alive, One Trick Pony, Oh Heavenly Dog.
I haven't heard of any of those movies.
You never heard of any of those?
None of them.
One Trick Pony was with Paul Simon. Oh Heavenly Dog was Chevy Chase. Guild Alive was Gilda Radner. Did a live
probably Gilda Radner
show, and it bombed. And Where the Buffalo Roam was Bill Murray. He did a sort of a biopic on Hunter S. Thompson. Just bombed.
I never heard of any of those movies.
No, anyway.
I heard of all the other ones, the 9 to 5 and all the rest of those.
Yeah, they were all popular. But
those were all the two. Kramer was Kramer. Like, yeah, I haven't seen them all, but I've at least heard of all of them.
And In God We Trust was Marty Feldman. He was like this monk that has to go out into society and stuff. Anyway, it was really terrible. They were all bombs. But anyway, so I figured instead of breaking down the movie, let's look at some of the themes, because Scorsese has a few recurring themes throughout a lot of his films, especially earlier in his career. And as far as I'm concerned, they're all on display here with Raging Bull. The first of which is the Italian-American experience. He seems to capture this better than almost any other filmmaker. Like, it captures that fast-talking, sort of expletive-laden speech patterns, and it's just this stereotypical Italian-American experience. There are all these loud interactions at home, usually laced with profanities and yelling. There's the machismo and the misogyny and the violence. Again, it's all stereotypes, but Scorsese depicts them. And I feel he does it, in a very, very intimate way.
So let me ask you this.
Yes.
Again, that's not a demographic that I fall into, so I don't have any firsthand knowledge of it. I only know what I know from TV and movies and things like this that depict the Italian-American experience as you've described it. But my question is, what came first? Did Martin Scorsese see what was going on in the world around him and put it on display in his movies? Or did he accentuate it in his movies for a broader audience to, like sometimes you'll ramp something up to really emphasize it, and then did that become what people expected? And did that cause change? And I mean, I don't know the answer, and I don't know if you know the answer.
It's almost like a chicken and the egg.
Yeah, and it's like, because obviously he follows up with movies like Goodfellas and Casino, where you have that idea of the mafioso and the guys who are the Italian American criminals and all of that kind of stuff. And it's like, and there's certainly a consistency in the way he presents these characters, which would lead someone like me to believe that, well, these stories all seem to be based on or loosely based on real life, so they must have a certain amount of truth to them in their depiction of these characters and how they talk to each other and how they interact with each other. But the more astute you become when you watch movies, you have to always keep that in mind, that what is being exaggerated for the purposes of your art? What are you trying to actually say, and what have you changed about the things that influenced this story to really make the point you're trying to make? And so that was one of the things I thought of when I was watching this was, how much of what I was seeing was very much, this is what it is, and this is a record of how it historically would have been, versus how much was this now the influence, so the people who saw themselves on the screen thought, I have to be like that because that's now how the wider world expects me to be. So I don't know. I don't know the answer.
I don't know the answer either. That's a great question. Not being Italian American myself. Now, I will say there was a time back when we first met, when I used to live in Toronto and work in Toronto. I used to work with a bunch of Italians in downtown Toronto, and they acted this way, But that being said, I think that Scorsese is depicting things, quite realistically, because if he didn't, I think there would have been an outcry from the Italian community, of which, he was a part of, right?
Yeah.
And also Jake LaMotta was a consultant on this movie, and I don't, think he would have, he would have signed on for a lot of this stuff. He'd be like, hey, you're just exaggerating, the way things are. He probably was like, you're capturing it exactly. And maybe not every Italian American family is like this. That's not the point. But LaMotta's was. And I think LaMotta's was maybe an exaggeration, but it was the extreme end of things, but it certainly was the way it was. Another thing I wanted to mention was Sigmund Freud's Madonna horror complex. It's a theme that's been explored in a few of Scorsese's movies, especially his early stuff. Again, Who's That Knocking at My Door, Mean Streets, Taxi Driver, and especially in this movie. If you remember, Groucho Marx once had a very famous joke, and he said, I would never want to belong to a club that would have someone like me as a member. And Scorsese explores this because there's a tendency in his male characters to treat women through this lens. You could kind of define it with Freud's complex. Like Jake LaMotta only sees women through the lens of this. They're either a virgin or they're a whore. And LaMotta's rage regarding his jealousy is just fueled, by his worldview of women, through this lens. It just consumes his view of women, and it just drives his behavior. And I think it's a major theme in the film, and it's a difficult theme. It's not comfortable. And so when you say, I watched this movie and I wasn't entertained, that's why I say you're not supposed to be entertained by this. You're supposed to be uncomfortable. That's the point of this film. We're exploring some themes that are supposed to make you uncomfortable. And that's kind of the whole point of it, right?
I mean, I assume that's correct. I can get behind that. But for me, and this is a problem I have with a lot of movies, is many of the problems that the characters in the movies have are problems they've made themselves. And this is a good example of that. Like the male characters, 100%. Most of them are despicable, and the way they treat the women in this movie is deplorable. And I know that it's of its time. Like the movie takes place in the 40s and 50s and 60s, and the gender roles were certainly different. And I assume in an Italian American community, they would have been even different than what my understanding of that would have been. And I'm not excusing any of that, but I assume the depiction is accurate. But these characters, it's like, especially the main guy, the Jake LaMotta, it's like he's clearly got rage issues, which makes sense since he's a boxer. He's clearly got confidence issues. It's clearly he's jealous. Yep. It's like he's got like this superiority complex where it's this whole thing, you think you're better than me kind of thing. And a lot of the male characters that are in this film all seem to have this same attitude. And it's like this idea where everybody's angry at everybody else for the smallest slight. And I'm sure this stems from other things, but we're only seeing a small slice of this. And it always bothers me when I see films like this where characters get angry for, in my mind, what seems like a no good reason. And they fly off the handle. And I just keep thinking to myself, well, this is a problem because you made it a problem. And why should I give a crap of the outcome, which in many cases is not positive, because you did something stupid. You chose to do something, ridiculous for whatever reason, and it's led to these consequences. And now, obviously, knowing what we know today and looking back, as a fighter, I'm sure that LaMotta probably had brain injuries, and there was probably other things going on, which might have led to some of his poor decision making. But it's that kind of thing when I watch a movie like this. It's just like, oh my God, look, here he goes again. She goes over and says hello to somebody she's known for years, and he gets all bent out of shape. Oh, are you sleeping with that guy? And rah, rah, rah. And it's like, why are you getting all bent out of shape? It makes no sense to me that anyone would do that unless you've got brain damage from being punched in the head 100 times.
Well, yeah, but the thing is, you're looking at this as if it's sort of a typical film where he would be the protagonist. He's not. It's a character study. It's a character study of a deeply, deeply flawed human being. And people like this exist. They still exist. And we don't like to look at that. We don't like to admit it. But it happens. And people like this are around us. And so it's supposed to make you uncomfortable. It's supposed to make you realize, hey, life isn't always pretty. There's a lot of ugly stuff, going on just under the surface in a lot of people's lives. I mentioned at the top some of the people involved in making the movie. Paul Schrader, I just want to touch base on him for a second. He co-wrote the screenplay with Martin. This guy, Paul Schrader, he's an interesting human being in Hollywood because he's always injected a lot of violence and sex into his screenplays. If you think, about the work he's done, like American Gigolo and Cat People and Taxi Driver and even Autofocus, which came out, many years later. He wanted to actually include a lot more sex and violence into this film, especially the sex, and they had to make a lot of changes to his screenplay. The scene where near the end when LaMotta's thrown in prison, Schrader originally wrote the scene to include masturbation, if you can believe it. And Scorsese was like, nah, man, this is too much. And so instead, he had Jake beat his head and his fists into the brick walls. Just a brutal scene. It's really hard to watch that scene. And I would argue it's much more effective. I think Schrader is an important screenwriter, but I think he's always been a little bit predictable as well with some of his stuff. But anyway, I think he's an important guy to mention in all this. But I want to talk about, you and I have talked about the Oscars a lot, on this podcast, and the 1980 Academy Awards. So Raging Bull was nominated for 8 Oscars, including picture, director, actor, supporting actress, and editing. And it won 2 for editing and best actor. Robert De Niro is a very decorated actor, to say the least, right? He won for Best Supporting Actor with The Godfather Part 2, and he won here, obviously, for Raging Bull. But he's been nominated 7 times. Pretty impressive. You got to at least admit, his performance was good, right?
Oh, absolutely. And like I said before, the I got to think that a big part of why he was recognized for this award at this time was the fact that he got into such good physical shape to accurately depict the body of a boxer in his prime, and then to put on all that weight so that he could play the same character 20 odd years later as a retired man who's now put on this weight and he's gone through this body transformation, and it's not a fat suit, it's not prosthetics, although I'm sure there were some prosthetics for the nose and stuff, but for the most part it was he just literally put on the weight. Like, I think I read they had to put the movie on hold for like 4 to 6 months while he gained all the weight, and then when they were shooting scenes with him, once he was so heavy, he couldn't do as much work per day because he just didn't have the stamina because he was in such poor shape because
60 pounds he put on. Yeah.
So I can certainly get why the body of people that recognize the excellence of the art would reward him for making such a time-consuming and important physical commitment to his art. And that's above and beyond the acting itself, which was great. I mean, I may not have liked the character, I may not have enjoyed the movie, but I thought his performance was fantastic. But that certainly goes a long way to understanding, well, why did he win? And you look at the people he was up against. I mean, they were good, but they weren't to this level good. So I have no bones about him being decorated for this film, given his performance. Would I have been upset if Scorsese had won director? No, I think that would have been a good call as well. If Raging Bull had won for best film, well, like I said, I'm not really digging this movie, so that one's one that I personally wouldn't have really agreed with, but I can see a lot of people looking back and, like we said at the top of the show, number 4 on the all-time 100 list, number 1 on the all-time sports movies. So I think if it had won Best Picture, a lot of people would have been happy and a lot of people would have thought that was the right pick. But the other performances, I mean, Pesci's good, but I don't necessarily think Pesci's great all the time, and he was good in this, but I don't think he was award-worthy good. And who else did you say was nominated? Kathy Moriarty was nominated for supporting.
Was she nominated for?
Yes, she was.
Yes, she was.
So I mean,
she didn't win.
She was okay, but I didn't really feel that she was really in the movie that much. And when she was, I didn't think she really performed. Like, her performance to me wasn't like, oh my God, who is this? Her performance is fantastic. I think in large part because of the part she's been given. You can only be as good as the material that's provided, and so I mean, I wasn't heartbroken to hear that she didn't win.
And that's
I did thought, going back to Pesci for a minute, when they later in the movie, after the brothers have had a falling out, and Jake LaMotta tries to reconcile with his brother, and he meets him in the car garage.
Yes,
and then he like hugs him and stuff. Pesci has this like hairdo and the beard and the mustache and stuff. Oh my God, I thought he was Stanley Tucci. It was, I started laughing. I couldn't stop laughing for a couple of minutes. Just the way he looked, it was such a transformation, because he's got like this sort of little Afro-y style hairdo when he's supposed to be younger, and then as he gets older, it's like, and he's got the hair's all, I think he's bald even, if I remember correctly, but it's just the way they had changed his look was so different. It took me right out of the scene. Anyway,
so you mentioned something interesting about reflecting back, years later, and you and I have done that on a few times on this podcast. And in retrospect, the film that wins the Oscar, for Best Picture doesn't always hold up, after time's passed. Yeah, and I would argue that is certainly the case with 1980. Ordinary People won Best Picture. No way. That's it's a better film.
What were the other nominees? You have the list there?
So I don't have it in front of me. I'm just trying to think. So there was Ordinary People and
Coal Miner's Daughter, probably.
Coal Miner's Daughter would have been nominated.
Because Sissy Spacek, was Sissy Spacek won for Coal Miner's Daughter?
Yeah, so Sissy Spacek won Best Actress. I'll come back to her in 1 second. I just want to just talk again about Ordinary People because of the director. So, you mentioned you wouldn't have been upset if Scorsese won. He should have won over Robert Redford.
For Ordinary. But again, Redford's pedigree and his history. And you got to remember, a lot of these awards are political.
They are.
It's about who you know and who you shake hands with and who you have a relationship with. And I got to think that someone like Redford had a lot more friends in Hollywood than someone like Scorsese.
Absolutely.
Given where they were in their point in their career. Plus, I think that's a large part of it. Which is not to say that Ordinary People was a bad movie.
No, I actually thought it was not bad. There was some good things about it. And
Redford's gone on to do other work. Like, he's clearly got some ability, but he's no Martin Scorsese. Like, who are you kidding?
And if you think about, like, that was his first movie, Redford's first film, and if you think about, all he really does thematically is just shoot every single scene using the photography rule of thirds. That's all I can ever think about when I watch Ordinary People.
Yeah.
Whereas Raging Bull is like just a tour de force of using film as a medium of art. And Scorsese uses the camera like a master just to create this picture. Like, he uses black and white and different frame speeds and close-ups and deep focus, and it's using film as a medium to tell a story. No way Redford was the better director.
Agreed.
Best supporting actor. I can understand the argument for Timothy Hutton over Pesci. I mean, Hutton, he was pretty amazing in Ordinary People, but there's no way Mary Steenburgen in Melvin and Howard was more deserving than Kathy Moriarty. Moriarty, I know you didn't like her performance. I really got to disagree with you. She was 17 years old when they shot this film, and she captures the emotions of this neglected wife, especially later in the film, like an actress with 20 years of experience. And when she first comes on the screen, when Jake sees her by the pool, you said you weren't really struck by her. I felt that she has an on-screen presence that I don't think has been seen on film since Marilyn Monroe. Like, Moriarty's career pretty much, disappeared after this film. And she was in Neighbors with Aykroyd and Belushi. I remember that. And she was in a movie called Soap Dish. And she's worked pretty consistently, just in nothing major, just these small, forgettable roles, right? But I also would argue with the Best Actress Oscar, Sissy Spacek won for Coal Miner's Daughter. And, it just goes back to what you've said before, Derek. The Academy loves it when actors portray real-life people on film.
Yeah. It's funny you bring that up. So I read a thing that was the point one of the trivia things they said was, in this year, De Niro won for playing real life person Jake LaMotta, and Sissy Spacek won for Coal Miner's Daughter. It was the singer, right? Loretta Lynn.
That's right. Yep.
Yeah. And in this is the only time where both male and female leading performers won for playing a real person, where the real person was still alive and present at the Oscars when the award was won.
Right.
And I thought that was interesting, and I think it just it puts the exclamation point on the point you were just saying, which we brought up previously, where the Academy loves to reward people for portraying a real person. Like Julia Roberts. Yep. She won an Oscar for playing Erin Brockovich. She'd been great in a dozen other movies before then, but that's the one they decided to give it to her for. Okay.
And all she really did was wear a push-up bra, to get that Oscar in a lot of ways.
The bra should have got a supporting Oscar.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, there you go. So the one thing I will mention, I know I'm really sort of arguing for Raging Bull here over Ordinary People, but I will say there is no way that Sissy Spacek should have won over Mary Tyler Moore in Ordinary People. Mary Tyler Moore was just incredible in that movie.
Yeah.
Like, she played against type, and to me, she just sort of reminded the world of how amazing of an actress that she really was. She wasn't just Mary Richards. My God, her performance as Beth Jarrett, it was the role of her career. So I think it just goes to show, like we've always said, winning an Oscar doesn't always mean it's the best of that year.
It's like
just so much more, like you said, politics and current tastes and career arcs and all that stuff. You're so right.
Yeah, and we brought it up before. One of the podcasts I listen to a lot is Bill Simmons' podcast on the Ringer Network, and one of the things he's been saying for years is, just like with professional sports, where your athlete can't go into the Hall of Fame until a certain amount of time has passed, it would be interesting to see movie awards be the same way. After 5 years, we're going to go back and award the Academy Awards for the best everything from 5 years ago. And it'd be interesting to see how things change, how taste has changed, how with 5 years of reflection, you can look back and say, oh, yeah, clearly that should be the winner. But of course, that's not the way the industry works. They award in the moment, right. And it's a lot of other, I don't want to say shenanigans, but who are we kidding? A lot of other shenanigans and behind the scenes and politics and glad handing and who goes to the junkets and who plays the game and who doesn't. And yeah, a lot of times, unfortunately, they don't make the right choice. And history is often the tells the tale that, hey, like you look back at certain movie years and you say, like, how did Star Wars not win the Oscar for Best Picture? How did Shawshank Redemption or Pulp Fiction not win the Oscar for Best Picture over Forrest Gump? Like, are you kidding me?
How is Robert Shaw not nominated for an Oscar for Jaws?
Yeah, for Jaws.
Crazy.
And seriously, but you give the silent movie The Artist the Oscar like less than 10 years ago? Are you kidding me? I don't know anybody who's seen that movie. Like, that was a total political move. So, in any case, that's a whole other podcast, which I think we've already had. So
I feel like we have talked about that. I want to talk. Yes. It's funny you mentioned The Artist, although that was silent, but it was black and white. So, black and white is something I think we need to touch base on here because the movie was obviously in black and white and done for stylistic reasons. Audiences today, I think, have a bit of an aversion to black and white films. But Derek, Mad Max Fury Road, that you had me watch for, I think it was last year on the podcast. Originally, George Miller wanted to shoot the film in black and white. The studio said, no way.
I can't imagine that would have gone over well.
But you could find on YouTube a black and white version of the trailer. It looks better than the original. It looks fantastic. But the thing is that modern audiences they wouldn't go out to the theater to see it. Like they would only go if it's in color, and it just goes to show, studios, they're driven by profits, right? Instead of directorial vision like they used to be back in the 70s and 80s.
I'll give you another modern example of that. The comic book movie, the X-Men, there was a movie not too long ago featuring Wolverine that was called Logan. And the idea was that it's like this, 20 years after the X-Men film franchise has had its heyday, all the mutant characters, all the main characters have started to die off or been hunted or whatever. And so this is Wolverine at making his last stand. It's what has he done in his retirement? He's clearly near the edge of his lifespan. And they released it and it did very well. It was very well received. It got a lot of accolades. And then they released it again in black and white and called it Logan Noir. And they released it theatrically that way, and it made additional money. And if you bought the DVD or the Blu-ray, most of them have the film in black and white and in color, so that you have the choice when you have it in your own home of which to watch. And that's another one where the director wanted to do it in black and white, was discouraged from doing it by the people who were paying the bills. But at the end of the day, as the quote unquote director's cut, was able to re-release it in black and white. And people who enjoy the movie feel the black and white is far superior to the color. So you're absolutely right.
Yeah. I think there's been some really good examples of movies that have been shot in black and white, like since color film was invented, and where it was done really well. Like movies, if you think like Schindler's List and Roma, those are really good examples. But as far as I'm concerned, throughout this whole era, you had one?
I was going to say Clerks, but
that was more just for budget because he didn't have any money.
If your movie is a dialogue-driven film, you don't have I've read things about that where they asked Kevin Smith, "Why'd you do it in black and white?" He said, "Well, in part because I couldn't afford color," but he said, "In part, the movie's about the dialogue, so let's strip away all the visual distractions so that you listen to the dialogue." So. In any case, sorry, to go back to it.
No, I was just going to say, of all the films that have been made, sort of since the invention of color, I still think Raging Bull is the best. I think there's a tendency for people to think of movies that are shot in black and white, since color's been invented, that these are just like, quote unquote art films, but if you think, like, why do people use that term, art film? For me, it's because black and white is an art form. I believe that. What about you?
I think a lot of people would say it's like an art film because if you take a film class, the majority of your syllabus is going to be classic films that are in black and white. So I think the preconception most people have is if you go to school to study film, you're going to be watching films that are in black and white. So if something is presented to you in black and white, you just assume, oh, it's an artsy film because it's like something you would see in an art class, in a film appreciation class. So that's always been my take on it.
Well, the thing with shooting movies in black and white is like it has to be for a reason. Like you mentioned with Clerks, there's a reason why he did it. Well, number one was the budget, but number two is because he wanted to strip things down and focus on the dialogue. So it has to be for an artistic purpose. And if you think about it, that's the case with Raging Bull. Like, everything in Jake LaMotta's life was black or white. There's no room for anything gray. You know, as I mentioned before, you know, to him, women are Madonnas or whores. There's winners and there's losers. Everything is black and white. And that's one of the reasons why I think the film wouldn't have worked as well in color. Also, I mean, it takes place in the 40s. So, you know, it makes sense to shoot it in black and white, you know, to give it that look. But the way that Scorsese uses light and shadow is so effective in black and white. And another thing was he didn't want the film to be sort of bathed in red blood, you know, from all the fight scenes. So he wanted to take away from that drama, that blood, and by shooting it in black and white. And the thing is, though, in black and white, it's still gory. Like, it doesn't lose, you know, any of its effect. We still get the impression of the blood, you know, from the wet sponges and when the blood sprayed all over the spectators in the front row. Oh, jeez. And interestingly, there's a montage in the film that shows Jake and Vicky getting married and having kids and moving into a house. And the montage is in color. It really
I noticed that. And I sort of noticed it, but I didn't immediately pick up that it had been in black and white and now it's in color until it went back to black and white. And then it dawned on me that last few minutes was in color.
I don't know what the reason is. I mean, you could argue it's, you know, Scorsese's maybe trying to look at the world through rose-colored glasses or something for those homey scenes. I don't know. It's very artistic. But I mean, another argument that's been put out there over the years is that Scorsese shot this movie in black and white because Rocky just came out 4 years before and was really successful, and he wanted to sort of differentiate, you know, his film from Stallone's film.
Yeah, I had read that too, that was not the reason to do it, but was certainly one of the reasons to do it.
Another theme I want to mention is jealousy. You've touched base on this. And, you know, we've mentioned Jake LaMotta is just driven by his worldview of women, especially his wife. And obviously the Madonna whore complex comes into play. You know, he just believes she's cheating on him. And at one point in the movie, this young up-and-coming boxing challenger comes along named Gennaro. And Vicky makes this off-the-cuff comment that, you know, he's got a pretty face. And it just drives Jake into this jealous rage. So, you know, he's all the experts are predicting he's going to lose in this fight. No, not only does he win, he beats Gennaro to an absolute pulp, and he just keeps pounding his face. And when he's done beating the living snot out of this guy, what does he do? Looks in the audience, finds Vicky, and just stares her down. Like, it's just brutal. And Nick Colasanto is like, he ain't pretty no more.
Yeah.
Like, it's such a brutal scene, my God. And, you know, you kind of alluded to this, the scene when they're in the bar, the Copa Club, and Jake watches Vicky walk from guy to guy. And all she's doing, like you said, she's just saying hi. You know, in that typical Italian fashion, they kiss on the cheek, right? Jake only sees it as her kissing guys. And Scorsese plays up these scenes because he doesn't use sort of standard slow motion. You know, instead of shooting everything at 24 frames per second, these scenes were shot in 48 frames per second. But where we see Jake's face, he's still in 24 frames per second, but she's shot in 48. So it just punches up that whole kind of motif, you know? He's watching her in slow motion, just as his jealousy's boiling over, right? And, you know, we see Scorsese use slow motion at other points in the movie. When he first sees her by the pool, it's almost like he doesn't see her as a woman. He just sees her as an object, you know, to obsess over. And then talking about jealousy, that you mentioned it when he accuses Joey, Pesci's character, of sleeping with his wife, and it's just ridiculous. Like, they're Italian, they kiss on the cheek, And Jake is accusing Joey of cheating with her, and so much so he just accuses Vicky, and so of course she just says this is so outrageous. She's just like, yeah, right, whatever. I cheated with him. I cheated with everybody. And so what does he do? He goes into Joey's house and beats the crap out of him right in front of his wife and kids. And then Vicky comes in and he punches her. And like, when the thing is, at any point in this movie, when we see that jealousy kind of rear its ugly head, he just gets more ferocious in the ring. And it's like his jealousy outside the ring fuels his rage inside the ring. It's just an ongoing motif. So powerful.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I agree with what you're saying, but to me, it's almost like, and I mean, I could totally be misreading it, but it's almost like you want to excuse some of his actions outside of the ring because, being a fighter is what he's the best at, and if this is what's going to make him a better fighter, you can excuse some of those other things. But there's so many of the things he does are unexcusable. And again, I understand that the movie takes place in a time where things were different. But if that kind of thing happened today, it wouldn't happen for very long. People would either stand up for themselves, fight back, ask for help, call the police. Like, none of those things happened because I got to think of, at the time, it was just the societal, I don't want to say this, well, it was the societal norm that certain things were just accepted and certain gender roles played out in certain ways. But as I mentioned before, like, he suffered from so much extreme jealousy that just seems so misplaced, and I never really felt that they gave me a good reason for why he had this crazy jealousy. Like, I don't understand it.
It's straightforward. It's because of toxic masculinity, right? That's what the whole movie is about. Right from the get-go, the opening scene, he's complaining to his first wife about how she cooks the steak. Like, he's mean to her, he's cruel to her, he treats her like she's beneath him. And if you think about it, the whole idea of eating steak, like, what's more representative of ultra masculinity than cutting and eating, the charred flesh of an animal? It's like this expression of dominance, right? And the boxing scenes, it's not a boxing movie. That's why I was laughing before when you said, it's the #1 sports film of all time. And we'll come back to that in a second. To me, it's not a boxing movie. The boxing is just representative of this toxic masculinity. And like, what better example of masculinity than two guys, in a ring beating each other to a pulp, right? I mean, the misogyny, the yelling, the profanity, the insecurity, the jealousy. The whole movie is basically an exploration of the effects, the devastating effects of toxic masculinity. And we've seen this theme explored in other films, but I would say Raging Bull does it better than any other film in history.
Which I don't disagree with. I guess it's not a topic that I'm interested in watching. So it's like, I don't know. That's part of the reason I didn't like it. I didn't feel that any of the male characters had any redeeming qualities, and I just the whole time kept thinking, good, you're getting what you deserved, and why are you doing these stupid things? Like, you're creating your own problems. Hey, look at that. You went to jail because you were stupid. Like, you brought a lot of this. Hey, you got conflict with your brother and your friends because you made bad choices. And I had a hard time understanding why anyone would make these choices. And maybe that says something about the world that I grew up in, where things are different or things are changing, or I've had opportunities or privilege that others haven't had. And it's unfortunate if this is the reality for other people. But yeah, I don't know. This I don't know. I didn't like it. I didn't care for it at all.
I get it. And you're not supposed to like it. You're supposed to be uncomfortable. And without getting into too much, I mean, my wife is a social worker. And I can tell you, this toxic masculinity, it exists in our society. It's still there. And it's uncomfortable to talk about, and it's uncomfortable to look at, and it's uncomfortable to see, especially if you've grown up in a good family, like you and I have. We've been very lucky. We've grown up with privilege, and, we both had good families with parents who love us and siblings. But not everybody has that, unfortunately. And unfortunately, it's worth exploring, and it's worth seeing sometimes that underbelly of society to really appreciate what we've got. You mentioned about it being a sports movie, which, I thought was interesting because you said it was the number 1 rated sports movie of all time. I think it's interesting because for me, this movie's not really about boxing, as crazy as that sounds. It's about jealousy and rage, and it's about misogyny and distorted worldviews. The boxing is just a manifestation of those emotions, and those themes.
Yeah, I think for me, if there had been, I think I read somewhere there's only 12 minutes of boxing in a movie that's 2 hours and 9 minutes. You have almost 2 full hours of not boxing in what is considered by many to be the best boxing movie ever made. Mm-hmm. I want it, if I'm going to commit myself, honestly, I'm not a big fan of the boxing genre on its face. I mean, I've seen a lot of those kinds of movies. I've certainly seen all the Rocky movies and things like that. Mm-hmm. But I wanted to see more of that, especially seeing how Scorsese shot the boxing scenes. And I could really, that to me was the highlight of this movie. For me, was I'm watching these boxing scenes going, this is amazing. And reading about how he did these things and how he was the first one to do it in a certain way and to have the camera in the ring. And like you had mentioned, I think at the end of the last podcast, how certain scenes he had a ring that was deliberately done bigger and deliberately done smaller. Yeah. So that the shots would look a certain way. That to me was fantastic. But if I got to sit through 2 hours of crap to get 12 minutes of good, that to me is not a fair trade-off. It's not a good ratio. I wanted another half hour of the boxing stuff and a half hour less of some of the rah, look at me. You think you're better than me? I don't need that. So.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, if you're looking for sort of technically correct boxing scenes, you don't watch Raging Bull. Because that's not what it is. I mean, Scorsese didn't even care about trying to depict the boxing scenes with any strategy or any technique, because that's not what the movie, but that's not what Jake LaMotta was all about, But that being said, these are some of the most memorable boxing scenes ever captured on film, like you mentioned. There's the slow motion, the blood flying everywhere, the sweat, the refusal of Jake LaMotta to ever be knocked down. At one point, he's supposed to take the fall. Remember, they're like, hey, man, you got to fall down in this match. So what does he do? He just puts his arms down and just lets Sugar Ray just beat him to a pulp. But, his face looks like filet mignon at the end of the fight. Mm-hmm. But he goes over to Sugar Ray and you know what he says to him? You never knock me down. It was just it was, and the way, like you mentioned, Scorsese has these different size rings, it goes from big and small, and I don't know. The other thing too is interesting. They shoot from below in these, in the boxing scenes, just like in Rocky. They always shoot them from below. I guess you don't have to pack an arena full of extras. Right? That's one thing, right? And I think the important thing there is. What's important is what's going on inside the ring, So I think you've ended up, here with some of the most memorable boxing scenes in history, and they're not even technically realistic or accurate, which is just amazing, The other theme I want to just touch base on before we move on is mirrors, because Scorsese uses mirrors throughout this film. There's the mirrors in the bedroom, in the bathroom, the back of the door, and even the reflection in the phone booth door. Normally, directors use mirrors to depict self-reflection, right? And if you think about Jake LaMotta, he can't really express himself with words, So maybe he uses, his reflection to determine how the world sees him, to maybe see how he shows himself to the world or something. It's just, it's an interesting thematic thing that goes on. I don't know if Scorsese maybe just uses the mirrors because they look cool, especially in black and white. But I think Scorsese is probably way too talented as a director to use stylistic props just for the hell of it. And if you think of the final scene, one of the best final scenes of any film, as far as I'm concerned, when he's sitting there and he's looking in the mirror and he's reciting Brando's On the Waterfront speech. Yeah. He's looking in the mirror and he's not just reflecting back on his life. He's reflecting on his relationship with his brother, which is what that speech is all about.
Right.
And he's not talking to himself. He's talking to his brother. And the thing is, it's not the best delivery of that speech. I mean, like, think about it. De Niro's got the chops to do that speech as good or better than Brando did. But that's not the point.
Yeah, but he's playing
Exactly.
LaMotta, and it's playing LaMotta doing this scene.
Exactly.
Which we know. I mean, we see at the very beginning of the movie, you see the older LaMotta rehearsing what he's going to present on stage. And so you see that he thinks he's going to be able to get on stage and deliver this. And you realize it's like, ooh, you are not a good public speaker. You are not an actor.
He's not. You're right.
And so when you see that scene at the end of the movie, it just reinforces what you already knew. He can say the words, and he may even understand some of what the deeper meaning is, but he's not able to deliver it with the emotion of an actor. So like the character is thinking, I'm going to portray this like Brando did,
right.
But obviously he doesn't. Yeah, to your point, it's not that De Niro can't do it. It's that LaMotta can't do it.
Right. And LaMotta always expresses himself through brutality and rage.
Yeah.
And when that's taken away from him, because of age or because of him putting on weight, all he's got left is his speech. And that's why he ends up in these seedy bars or these strip clubs.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I know you've mentioned De Niro isn't one of your favorite actors, and I get it. He often seems to be playing sort of different variations of just the same character. But I don't know. I think for what he does, I think he does it very well. Scorsese used him as a main collaborator in the early part of his directing career. He's moved on to Leonardo DiCaprio, for the latter part of his career now.
Scorsese, that is.
Yeah, Scorsese has.
Yeah.
But I know even though you're not the biggest De Niro fan and you're not the biggest Raging Bull fan, but I would hope that as a film fan that you can acknowledge the style, the substance, the themes, and just the importance of Raging Bull as an important film. For me, going back full circle to what we said at the beginning of the podcast, I think it's one of the 5 most important American films of all time. I think it's right up there with, and this is in no particular order, I would say Citizen Kane, The Godfather, There Will Be Blood, Taxi Driver, Pulp Fiction, and Raging Bull. Maybe that's 6. So I think it's I think it's an important film. I hate to ask you this, but can you give it a rating out of 10?
I'm going to give it a very generous, for its direction, 5.
Okay.
It passes. It gets a pass for me. It gets the minimum you need to make a passing grade at 50%. I'm going to give it a 5 out of 10. I would not recommend this to very many people unless they were studying film or were in some other way film buffs and they wanted to like revisit the classics. Like, this is something that I think you would recommend to Yancey because he may not have seen it. And I do think it's important that someone who thinks of themselves as a film lover goes back and reviews older films to understand where some of the more modern conventions have come from.
Right.
So from that point of view, it definitely deserves marks. And I think, honestly, I think it's one of Scorsese's best, if not his best work. I don't like the movie, but I love the direction. I love a lot of the stylistic choices he made. I think De Niro's performance is great. I just don't think it's a good movie. And so I'm going to give it a 5.
See, this is where I thought I would get you because you're a film buff like I am. That's one of the reasons why we became such good friends all those years ago and have been friends ever since. And this is where I thought I would get you. It was as a film buff, you would really appreciate this as a film. But out of 10,
hey, the 5 was the appreciation, man.
I guess I will give it out of 10. I would give it a 9.75.
Wow.
It's that good.
Wow.
As a film. So
okay.
It is what it is. I don't know. Obviously, you completely disagree, but that's just the way it is. But anyway, on that note, let's have some
fun with Caveman.
All right, my friend, it was my film, so it's over to you. Take us away. What do you got?
All right, so this trivia might be a little embarrassing for you. I don't normally
Yep.
We've been listening back to the greatest hits episodes where we put together the trivia segments.
Yes, those are a lot of fun.
A lot of the first 3 or 4 times you had me on the show, I didn't really fully appreciate that you didn't have that 90s and 2000s movie knowledge, and so I threw a lot of questions at you that fell into that vein that you just had no idea of the answer.
No clue.
And I kind of felt like I maybe embarrassed you a little on your own show. So let me apologize all these years later for doing that.
That's all right.
And then since I understood sort of your wheelhouse, I've tried to give you trivia that I think you actually have a chance of answering correctly. And in some cases, I reach out a little bit just to try and test the waters and, make you work for it.
I do that for you too. Yeah.
And I appreciate that.
Yeah.
But today I'm going to move you out of your comfort zone, but I think there's a chance you might actually do okay on this one. All right. So this is arguably Robert De Niro's greatest performance.
I would say so. Yeah.
I don't think you'll have a lot of people that would, if you said that this was his greatest performance, most people would either agree or say, yeah, I could be talked into giving that answer.
Okay.
Excuse me. So with that in mind, I want to look at Robert De Niro's career. Okay. So I looked at his IMDb credits, and he's got over 100 acting credits.
Unreal.
This guy is a machine. He put out so much stuff.
Yes.
And I personally found that in the late 80s, going into the 90s, was when I started to see more and more of De Niro's stuff. Okay. And then, of course, into the 90s, I started working at the video store. And so anytime something new came out, I would see it. So 90s De Niro for me is the one that I know the best.
Okay.
And so today I'm going to test you on 90s De Niro.
90s De Niro. Oh, I'm in trouble.
Yeah. So I pulled almost every movie he was in from 1990 to 2000. There was like 25 on the list. I think I pulled like 17 or 18 of them. This is what I'm going to do.
In 10 years, he did 25 films?
Oh, yeah. It's ridiculous. This guy
crazy.
Just can't stop working. Now, in all fairness, some of these movies, he's not the star. He's got smaller parts. But again, when you get to be De Niro, you can have a smaller part and still be a big part of the movie.
For sure.
So this is what we're going to do. Often on this show, I don't feel we necessarily give ladies enough love. There's a lot of strong actresses that I just think when we put our list together, we tend to just call out the guys.
Right.
And so I think it's important to acknowledge the great work that the women do in a lot of these films. So De Niro, having done over 100, has 100 acting credits, has worked with almost every great actress you can imagine.
Oh, for sure.
So in the 90s, he did a ton of movies. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you the name of the leading lady from the film that De Niro was in, and I want you to name the movie. Now, some of these might be a real shot in the dark for you. So if you don't have an immediate guess, I will then give you the year it came out, but you know it'll be between 1990 and 2000, and I'll read you the description from the IMDb, which should hopefully help.
That helps. I usually do that for you too.
I'm going to start with just giving you the name of the actress.
Okay, I'm going to relax. I'm going to have a drink, and I'm going to do my best at this.
Okay. Right? Okay. Right. And I got a fair amount of them here. Okay. And there, realistically, Chris, I know based on what you know, you're probably not going to do so well in the trivia tonight, and I'm sorry about that. But I just thought this was a good avenue to go down. So, all right. We're going to start in 1990, and we're just going to, every movie is going to be newer than the one that came before it. So you ready?
You're giving me the female, the year, and the synopsis? Is that what you're giving me? Or just the female?
If you want all of those things, I will give you all those, but I'm going to start with just the actress first.
All right, go ahead.
Okay. Jane Fonda.
I don't know.
Okay, it came out in 1990. And the description is: a struggling widow falls in love with an illiterate short-order cook whom she teaches to read and write in her kitchen each night.
I don't know.
Okay, it was called Stanley and Iris.
Oh, God. Okay.
That was a tough one.
That's hard. Okay, next.
All right. Julie Kavner, the voice of Marge Simpson.
Oh, I know Julie Kavner. I don't know what movie she was in, though.
Also in 1990. And this, you should get it from the description. The victim of encephalitis epidemic many years ago have been catatonic ever since, but now a new drug offers the prospect of reviving them.
Oh, that was Penny Marshall's Awakenings, right?
Yes. Yeah. I know you'll get some of these from the description. Okay, next one. Jennifer Jason Leigh.
Oh, God. I don't know.
1991. Two Chicago firefighter brothers who don't get along have to work together while a dangerous arsonist is on the loose.
Was it Backdraft?
It was Backdraft.
Oh, yes.
Good job.
That was Ron Howard, wasn't it?
It was indeed.
Yeah. Oh, cool. Okay. I didn't know that she was in. I think I'd seen parts of that. Anyway.
I've never seen it either. Okay. This is a nice, easy slow ball right over the plate.
All right.
Jessica Lange.
Jessica Lange.
1991.
Oh, was it Scorsese's Cape Fear?
Yes. Yeah. Yes, it was. There you go. See, I knew you'd get that one.
Oh, okay, yeah. I had to think about that.
All right.
This is the 90s. I'm not so good with this.
I know. Some of these, you're going to really need to lean on.
But it was Scorsese, so yeah.
All right. Uma Thurman.
I don't know.
Okay, it was in 1993. The description is when a shy, soft-spoken Chicago detective, Wayne Dobby, inadvertently saves the life of a local gangster, Frank Milo, he's the reluctant recipient of an unusual one-week thank you gift, a beautiful bartender.
I'll say a Bronx Tale.
No, that's wrong. It was called Mad Dog and Glory.
Oh, jeez.
The bartender's name was Glory, and the Chicago detective was known as Mad Dog.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. All right. Ellen Barkin. There are two answers for this. Do you know either one of them?
Ellen Barkin. She was just recently in a thing that I watched with my wife, Animal Kingdom. Hadn't seen her in years, but I don't know what De Niro did with her in the 90s. I don't know.
All right. I think the first one's a little tougher than the second one. So the first one was in 1993. The description is the story about the relationship between a rebellious 1950s teenager and his abusive stepfather, based on the memoirs and writer and literary professor Tobias Wolff.
Don't know.
Okay, it was called This Boy's Life. That was a tough one. Okay, this one I think you got a better chance at.
All right.
Ellen Barkin again.
Yep.
From 1996 this time.
1996. Okay.
Okay. An all-star baseball player becomes the unhealthy focus of a down-on-his-luck salesman.
Oh, I know. That just was The Fan.
Okay.
Wesley Snipes was the baseball player. Oh, I forgot. Ellen Barkin was in that. I remember I saw that movie once. Yeah. Okay.
And a very young Javier Bardem is in it too. Or not Javier Bardem, Benicio del Toro.
Oh, I don't remember him, but okay.
Yeah. All right. Helena Bonham Carter.
Copland?
Nope.
Oh.
It was from 1994.
Okay.
And this will totally give it away. When a brilliant but unorthodox scientist rejects the artificial man that he has created, the creature escapes and later swears revenge.
Oh, he was in a remake of, was it Frankenstein?
Yes, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein.
Yeah.
Yes,
I never saw it, but I never saw that, but I like Frankenstein, so I remember hearing about it. Okay.
Okay. Next one. This is a super easy one.
Okay.
From the 90s. Sharon Stone.
Oh, I know this. It's Casino.
Yes, it is. I knew you'd get that one.
Oh, I got an easy one. Yeah.
All right. This one I think is easy too, but I honestly don't know if you've seen this movie. Ashley Judd.
No. I don't think I know.
Okay, from 1995,
okay.
A group of professional bank robbers start to feel the heat from police when they unknowingly leave a clue at their latest heist.
Don't know.
It's Heat.
Oh, I've never seen that. That.
Okay, well, we're going to write that down, and we're going to do that one in an upcoming episode then.
Wasn't that like, it was well known because it was him and Pacino or something that did that? Yeah, yes. I never saw it. I remember hearing about that, but I never watched it.
It's another really long one, though.
Yeah.
But, okay, this one's a tough one.
All right.
Minnie Driver.
Minnie Driver?
Yes.
Oh, God, I have no idea.
I don't think you'll know this one. This is a huge cast. It's from 1996.
Okay.
After a prank goes disastrously wrong, a group of boys are sent to a detention center where they are brutalized. 13 years later, an unexpected random encounter with a former guard gives them a chance for revenge.
No idea.
It was called Sleepers.
Oh,
and it had Brad Pitt and Dustin Hoffman and Jason Patric. It had a huge cast.
He has done you're right. He's done a lot of movies in the 90s that nobody's ever heard of. Or at least not me.
All right. Janine Garofalo. I'll give you a hint. You've already guessed.
I have no idea.
You've already guessed this movie as one of the other answers that was wrong.
Was it Copland?
It was Copland. Good one. Okay,
I never saw that, but I remember because Stallone put on a lot of weight for that role.
He did indeed.
It was kind of famous, but it was a bomb. It was supposed to be dumb.
Yeah, it wasn't great. I saw it not too long ago again. Yeah. It was just okay. All right, here's a nice super duper, super easy one. And if you don't get this one, then we're not friends anymore. Pam Grier.
Oh, Jackie Brown.
There you go. Jackie Brown from 1997.
Love the scene with De Niro and Bridget Fonda. Oh, it's so funny. Yeah.
All right. Here, this was a little tougher, but we did just talk about this movie on a recent podcast. Anne Heche. Or Anne Heche. I think it's Anne Heche.
Oh, that was I saw this movie and I hated it. Was it Wag the Dog?
It was Wag the Dog.
Yes.
You didn't like that one?
No, I didn't like that movie at all.
I just rewatched that one too. Yeah. It was pretty good.
No, I didn't.
All right,
like it. I remember that though. I remember that movie.
This one I know you have not seen, but again, we talked about it not too long ago because I just watched it not too long ago. Gwyneth Paltrow.
I don't know.
From 1998. Mm-hmm. Modernization of a classic story. Finds the hapless Finn as a painter in New York City pursuing his unrequited and haughty childhood love.
I don't know.
Great Expectations.
Oh, jeez.
Which I think we talked. I still have it on my PVR.
Maybe.
It's a good one.
I don't
know. Like it. All right.
Don't know.
Friends star Lisa Kudrow.
Oh my goodness.
I'll bet you've actually seen this movie.
You think so?
I think so.
Don't remember seeing her in very many movies. So
all right, from 1999,
mm-hmm.
A comedy about a psychiatrist whose number one patient is an insecure mob boss.
Is it Analyze That?
It is Analyze This. I'll give it to you.
Analyze This. I haven't seen it, but I've heard of that.
With Billy Crystal.
Billy Crystal. Yeah. I can see their faces on the movie poster, but I never watched it.
All right.
I didn't know Lisa Kudrow was in it because I didn't watch it. So.
All right.
I've heard of it.
Last one on my list is from the year 2000.
Okay.
Blythe Danner.
Was that Meet the Parents?
Yes. All right. It was strong. Nice.
It was just a guess. I was pretty sure on that one. I haven't seen it. I've seen parts of it. So I don't know.
All right.
That was tough.
I knew it would be tough. But you got a lot of them. You got a fair amount. I mean, some of them I think I knew were going to be pretty easy. Like Pam Grier, I thought was pretty much a gimme.
Yeah. It's funny we were talking about directors, and when we were talking about Scorsese, I thought, is there any director out there who's, because you said Scorsese I like, but I don't like all of his films, and I thought, is there any directors that I can think of that I like all their films? And the only one I could think of was Tarantino.
Yeah, that's a good pick. I don't think
there's one of his films that I hated. I've liked them all. Some I like more than others, but I think I like all of his films.
Spielberg has a few bombs on his list where you're like,
1941
really?
and Always, and Spielberg's had a couple of bad ones.
I mean, he's had some fantastic ones. Don't get me wrong. But
best director that ever lived.
Yeah, for sure. All right, you did pretty well, all things considered. I knew that was a little outside of your comfort zone, but
definitely
it certainly emphasized the prolific nature of Robert De Niro and that he has done a ton of stuff and continued through the 90s and 2000s. I like that. As he got a little older and towards the mid to late 90s, he sort of changed his image. He went from more of that mobster tough guy to more of the dad or the granddad, and things like Meet the Parents, where he leaned into the humor side of it. And I think that was a good decision for him. It got him like a different kind of audience because he started to play a different kind of role. And
you can't play that same role when you're older.
No.
So it was smart. I remember I went to the theater with my wife a couple of years back, and we saw a movie called Silver Linings Playbook. And
with my boyfriend Bradley Cooper.
Yeah, it was pretty flawed. I mean, I thought Bradley Cooper and Jennifer Lawrence were totally miscast in it because they were too good looking for the parts.
Yeah.
But De Niro was really good. He was a standout in that. He was very different, and I liked him a lot. So yeah, I think you're right. He's sort of adapted, his career. So
yeah.
No, all good. All right. Well, I'll tell you what, we will be back next week with a topic, with a top 5 list. But until then, this is Chris McBrien for Derek Myers saying, thanks for listening to Pop Goes Your World, the pop culture podcast for the generations.
Thanks for listening to Pop Goes Your World. You can contact Chris and Derek at popgoesyourworld.com. Please take a minute and review the podcast on iTunes or wherever you download and listen to the show.